Today's story takes place in Nagasaki and Saga prefectures, two neighboring prefectures located in the northwest of Kyushu Island, Japan. In the city of Kashima, in southern Saga prefecture, a family of 5 lived in a house in the Koshi area. The husband, Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, 36, worked for a telecommunications company. His wife, Reiko Yamaguchi, 33, was a housewife. They had 3 children: their eldest son, who was 13 years old, their second son, who was 10 years old, and their daughter, who was 4 years old. The seemingly peaceful life of this family was suddenly turned upside down by an unexpected event. In the early hours of September 11th, 1992, in the Tara area of Saga Prefecture, a chaotic scene unfolded. A woman in a state of panic ran to the front door of a house, frantically banging on it while screaming, "Help! My husband fell into the sea!" The desperate cry for help woke the homeowners from their deep sleep. They hurriedly opened the door to find a woman in soaking wet clothes trembling before them. Upon grasping the situation, the homeowners immediately called the police and mobilized local fishermen to search the sea area for the victim. The woman who had knocked on the door was Reiko Yamaguchi. Her husband loved night fishing and often invited her to join him at the sea. Around 8 p.m. that evening, they had gone to a seawall on the Tara coast. While fishing, they had argued over a minor issue, causing Reiko to walk away in sadness. By dawn, when she had calmed down and returned to the seawall, she discovered her husband had vanished, leaving only a fishing rod behind. Fearing he might have fallen into the sea, she rushed to a nearby house to seek help. After receiving the report, the police quickly arrived at the scene. However, due to the darkness, they couldn't immediately find the victim. The fishermen involved in the search also couldn't detect anything. A while later, the police finally found Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's body near the sea bottom, with no signs of life. Upon preliminary examination, there were no apparent wounds on the victim's body, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. The time of death was estimated to be around 2 a.m. The police didn't conduct a detailed autopsy and concluded it was an accident. The death of her husband left Reiko Yamaguchi feeling extremely sorrowful. With 3 school-age children, the burden of life now weighed heavily on her shoulders. Reiko's dire circumstances evoked sympathy and compassion from many people. Reiko Yamaguchi was born in Saga Prefecture, Japan. She was the youngest child in her family. Her father was a police officer with a hot temper who often beat and scolded his wife and children. Her mother always endured her husband's bad temper patiently. Reiko grew up in this less than harmonious family environment. After graduating from high school, she attended a nursing college. Upon graduating at the age of 20, she began working as an intern nurse at a local hospital. By chance, Reiko met Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, who was 3 years her senior. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they became a couple. After 6 months, they met each other's families and prepared for marriage. Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's family had a distant relative, an 89-year-old man living alone in the Koshi area of Kashima City. The old man offered to adopt Katsuhiko on the condition that he would take care of him in his old age, in exchange for leaving his house and land to Katsuhiko after his death. Upon hearing this proposal, Katsuhiko immediately agreed, as it was a good opportunity when he was preparing to marry and needed a house. After Katsuhiko Yamaguchi and Reiko got married, they moved in with the old man. Reiko quit her job at the hospital to become a housewife, taking care of her husband and the old man. The couple had a clear division of labor. One would take care of household matters, while the other would handle social affairs. From 1980 to 1988, the couple had 3 children. During this time, the old man passed away due to illness. The couple inherited his property, making their life more comfortable. However, the good times didn't last long. The Yamaguchi family's life gradually fell into a spiral of difficulties when Katsuhiko became addicted to gambling. Although he worked for a telecommunications company, his income was not enough to cover his increasingly expensive habit. The inherited assets, which should have been a springboard for the family's life, were quickly squandered by him. All the land was sold and debts piled up. The family's life became increasingly difficult. In these dire circumstances, Reiko Yamaguchi remained patient. She didn't complain about her husband, instead devotedly taking care of their 3 children and taking on part-time jobs to make ends meet. However, her silent sacrifice seemed insufficient to maintain her husband's affection. The family tragedy became even more bitter when, not long after their youngest daughter was born, Katsuhiko had an affair. Not wanting her children to lose their father figure, Reiko had to turn a blind eye to her husband's infidelity. However, Katsuhiko became increasingly brazen in his extramarital relationship. He often went on dates with his mistress, sometimes absent from home for days, leaving his wife and children in both material and emotional deprivation. Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's mistress was named Kyoko, a married woman who had worked in a bar. She knew how to manipulate men's psychology. Katsuhiko was quickly captivated by Kyoko's gentle and seductive demeanor. He willingly spent lavishly on his new lover, despite his family's tight financial situation. Meanwhile, Kyoko cleverly concealed this extramarital relationship from her husband, Shota. She and Katsuhiko often met secretly and went to karaoke. Later, Kyoko and her husband Shota planned to open an izakaya, a type of Japanese bar, in Kashima City, but were still short 1.2 million yen, approximately $11,000 in capital. Kyoko asked Katsuhiko for help. Without hesitation, Katsuhiko decided to contribute the full amount. Thanks to this, the izakaya opened smoothly. Katsuhiko became a regular customer at the bar, but his purpose was not to drink, but to meet privately with Kyoko. Although they frequently met at the bar, Kyoko's husband Shota remained unaware of this. In April 1990, Kyoko divorced her husband Shota, but they continued to manage the izakaya together. This created favorable conditions for Katsuhiko to frequent the bar more often, to the point where it almost became his second home. Finally, Shota noticed something unusual. He began to suspect that Kyoko had been having an affair before the divorce. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, and he decided to go to Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's house to demand 1.5 million yen, about $13,600, in compensation. Unexpectedly, Katsuhiko agreed immediately. At this point, Shota suddenly realized that the amount he had demanded was too little compared to the actual damage. Meanwhile, he happened to see Reiko Yamaguchi in a corner of the house. Her short hair and beautiful, delicate face caught Shota's attention. Reiko exuded the gentle demeanor of a devoted wife, an ideal model in Shota's eyes. Suddenly, a dark idea arose in his mind: to take Katsuhiko's wife as a form of revenge. Afterward, Shota began frequently making harassing phone calls to Reiko Yamaguchi. She told her husband about this, but he didn't care and continued to meet his mistress every day. Once, when Katsuhiko was with Kyoko, Shota called again to arrange a meeting with Reiko to discuss compensation once more. To avoid further phone harassment, Reiko decided to meet him to resolve the issue once and for all. Unexpectedly, when they met, Shota forcibly took Reiko to a hotel, despite her fierce resistance. Under Shota's threats, Reiko was compelled to reluctantly have relations with him. Not stopping there, Shota took intimate photos of Reiko and used them as a tool to blackmail her into continuing their relationship, threatening to make the photos public if she refused. Feeling hurt and humiliated, Reiko went to her husband to tell him everything that had happened. She hoped Katsuhiko would end his relationship with Kyoko and protect her from Shota's harassment. However, Katsuhiko's reaction left Reiko even more desperate. He was not only indifferent, but also thought Reiko was too sensitive and couldn't handle a little difficulty. He even had the twisted thought that, since he had a relationship with Kyoko, it wasn't a big deal for his wife to compensate Shota. Reiko was shocked by her husband's words, but in this dire situation, she had to accept her fate, reluctantly falling into a complex four-way relationship. Later, Shota demanded that Reiko Yamaguchi come to work at his izakaya and promised to pay her a monthly salary. However, Reiko refused because she felt embarrassed to face Kyoko. But Shota didn't care. He still insisted that she come to work, saying her husband had already agreed. In the following days, Reiko Yamaguchi had to go to the izakaya almost every day to work. She gradually became numb to seeing her husband being affectionate with another woman. She no longer hoped her husband would change and only wanted to work hard to support her children. Reiko didn't want her children to know about their father's affair, so she suggested to her husband that they maintain the appearance of a normal couple at home, not letting the children notice anything. Her husband verbally agreed but still frequently beat and scolded her, showing no marital affection. For the sake of her children, Reiko Yamaguchi had to endure. However, she never expected that just a year later, her husband would drown in the sea. When the incident occurred, Reiko no longer had any feelings for her husband, but she didn't want her children to lose their father. After her husband's death, the burden of raising the children fell heavily on her shoulders alone. Fortunately, all 3 children were well behaved, which provided her with some consolation. Not long after this tragedy, misfortune struck the family again. 6 years after Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's death, in the early hours of October 27, 1998, Reiko Yamaguchi suddenly ran into a convenience store in Konagai Town, Nagasaki Prefecture, in a state of panic. She said that her second son, Toshitaka Yamaguchi, had been squid fishing at a nearby port when he slipped and fell into the sea. The store clerk immediately called the police upon hearing this. The Nagasaki Prefectural Police, after receiving the report, notified the Konagai Town Fishery Association to send boats to the Juishi port for rescue. After 40 minutes of searching, they found Toshitaka Yamaguchi's body about 164 feet from the port. However, the police quickly became suspicious because Toshitaka's body was wrapped in a lot of tape. If the boy had really slipped and fallen into the water by accident, how could there be tape on his body? It seemed like this was someone's deliberate action. When she saw her son's body being pulled up, Reiko Yamaguchi appeared extremely distraught. However, the experienced police officers realized that the woman before them was not as simple as she appeared. They began to interrogate her. Reiko Yamaguchi stated that her second son was in middle school and had excellent academic performance. He had an older brother and a younger sister. Their father had passed away 6 years ago. The family of 4 was living in Saga Prefecture. Around 10:30 p.m. the previous night, Toshitaka had said that the pressure of studying was too great recently, so he wanted to go fishing to relax and asked his mother to take him to Konagai port to catch squid. By dawn, the boy had slipped and fallen into the water. It was very dark at the time, so visibility was poor. Reiko Yamaguchi had tried to use a tree branch to pull her son up but failed. Unable to swim, in her panic, she ran to a nearby convenience store for help. The police were skeptical of Reiko Yamaguchi's statement. Since the incident didn't occur on a weekend and there was school the next day, it seemed unreasonable for her son to ask his mother to take him fishing late at night. Moreover, they were living in Saga Prefecture, while the port was in Nagasaki Prefecture, about 12.4 miles apart. If they really wanted to relax by fishing, they could have easily done so in Saga Prefecture, so why go so far? Furthermore, October is not the squid fishing season, which is basic knowledge for people living near the sea. Therefore, the police believed that this case certainly had some hidden aspects. Subsequently, they decided to conduct an autopsy on Toshitaka's body. The forensic results showed that there were sedatives in the victim's stomach, no apparent wounds on the body, and the cause of death was drowning. The time of death was estimated to be around 1 a.m. on October 27th. From this point, the police suspected that Reiko Yamaguchi was likely the main culprit. They speculated that she had secretly given her son sedatives, waited until the boy was sound asleep, then used tape to bind his hands and feet before throwing him into the sea, staging the scene to look like an accidental drowning. But why would Reiko Yamaguchi want to kill her own son? The police quickly discovered that Reiko had purchased a large accident insurance policy for her second son, with herself as the beneficiary. According to the insurance terms, if her son died in an accident, she would receive a very large compensation payment. The police also discovered that 6 years ago, Reiko's husband had also drowned under suspicious circumstances. At that time, she had received 100 million yen, about $907,000, in insurance money. Therefore, they suspected that Reiko had carefully planned both cases to defraud the insurance company. Because the Saga prefectural police had not thoroughly investigated the cause of Reiko's husband's death 6 years ago, some suspicious points had been overlooked. Now, the police found the person who had helped Reiko report the incident 6 years ago to ask for more details. The person who reported the incident recalled that at that time, Reiko had come knocking on their door at midnight, appearing very agitated and saying that her husband had fallen into the sea. The strange thing was that it hadn't been raining that day, but her entire body was soaking wet. She had said that she couldn't swim, so she had come to ask for help. So why was she wet? This made people suspicious. Next, the police sought out the fishermen who had participated in the search that year. Surprisingly, all of them believed that the incident that year was certainly not a simple accident, and it had many suspicious points. After receiving the news that someone had fallen into the sea, the fishermen had driven their boats to the area where the incident occurred. On the seawall, there was only a fishing rod stuck there with no bait, tackle box, or any other fishing equipment. It didn't look like the gear of a real fisherman, but rather like someone who didn't know much about fishing had deliberately placed it there. After the victim's body was recovered, they had told the police about their suspicions, but were ignored. The police hadn't even conducted a basic investigation before hastily concluding it was an accident. In fact, the police that year had also discovered some unusual points. For example, at the time of the incident, it was low tide with shallow water. The location where the victim fell into the water wasn't deep enough to cause drowning. Even if someone had accidentally fallen in, they could have easily waded to shore. Additionally, the seabed was full of sharp rocks, and if someone had really fallen, they would likely have been scratched. However, there were no wounds on the victim's body. Based on the newly collected evidence, the police believed that the case from 6 years ago might not have been an accident, and Reiko Yamaguchi was the prime suspect in the case. Next, they interviewed some neighbors to understand the daily life situation of this family. A neighbor said, "Toshitaka was a well-behaved, studious child who always took the initiative to greet people politely. However, for some unknown reason, the boy's face was often injured, and he even had a broken nose once. When people asked out of concern, the boy stammered that he had gotten into fights with his siblings at home and accidentally got hurt. The neighbor suspected it was caused by his mother's boyfriend. That man had a hot temper and often abused the children, especially Toshitaka. Another neighbor told the police he often saw Yamaguchi Toshitaka studying under a streetlight or in front of a vending machine when he returned from night shifts. Sometimes he even saw the boy walking the dog at midnight, even when it was raining. The neighbor vaguely felt that the boy was in trouble, but whenever he asked if the boy needed any help, he always refused. During the investigation, the police also learned that Toshitaka's family was very poor. His mother's boyfriend often beat and scolded the children. Reiko Yamaguchi should have received a large insurance payout after her husband's death, enough for the whole family to live comfortably, so why were they living in such poverty? To find the answer to this question, the police investigated the background of Reiko Yamaguchi's boyfriend. This man's name was Keio Sotoo, 51 years old, with no stable job and living by deceiving others. He was very skilled at manipulating women's feelings, luring them into his trap, and then swindling their money to spend. He was addicted to gambling, spending any money he had on gambling until he lost it all. The police suspected that Reiko Yamaguchi might have been psychologically manipulated by Keio Sotoo, and all the insurance money had fallen into his hands. Therefore, they sought out Keio for investigation. Soon after, under police pressure, he confessed to all his crimes. Keio Sotoo was born in Fujitsu County, Saga Prefecture. He was the youngest of 5 siblings, with 1 older brother and 3 older sisters. His mother died early, and his father raised the 5 children alone. Keio was mischievous and destructive from a young age, always at the bottom of his class academically. In high school, he befriended delinquents and was expelled before graduation. Afterward, Keio went to Tokyo alone to make a living. He found work as a truck driver and part-time at a bowling alley. At 26, Keio got married. The couple lived in Kanagawa Prefecture and had 3 children. Life seemed stable. However, after just 3 short years, Keio became addicted to gambling, losing all their savings and accumulating millions of yen in debt. By the age of 30, Keio found a new job as a bus driver in Kanagawa Prefecture, but it still wasn't enough to cover expenses. Gradually, his temper became irritable, beating his wife and children at the slightest provocation. In May 1984, his wife, unable to bear such a life anymore, divorced him and took their 3 children. 4 years later, Keio was fired for causing an accident while driving a bus. Not only did he lose his job, but he also had people constantly coming to collect debts, forcing him to hide everywhere. That same year, his father passed away due to illness. Keio took this opportunity to return to his home in Saga Prefecture and take over the store his father had run. However, Keio was still addicted to gambling, and all the store's money was gambled away. In 1990, Keio's older brother also died from illness, and his 3 older sisters successively developed mental illnesses requiring long-term hospitalization. Keio became the only normal person in the family. After his sisters fell ill, they each received a monthly disability allowance. This money, of course, fell into Sotoo's hands. Additionally, he received the allowances for his deceased parents. In fact, these amounts were entirely sufficient for him to live on, but he gambled it all away. Later, he even mortgaged the house to borrow money from the bank. For a long time, Keio began dating many women. Whenever he had the chance, he would borrow money from them, promising to repay double in the future. These women were often deceived by his sweet talk, willingly giving him all their savings to spend. Keio relied on these fraudulent methods to barely maintain his lifestyle. At the end of 1991, through an acquaintance's introduction, Keio went to drink at the izakaya where Reiko Yamaguchi worked and happened to meet her. Afterward, he frequently came to the bar. Reiko Yamaguchi also had feelings for him. Gradually, they became a couple. Until one day in 1992, Reiko Yamaguchi suddenly said she wanted to eliminate her husband and hoped Keio could help. She promised to share half of the insurance money with him after succeeding. Initially, Keio didn't want to do this because he knew it was a crime, but because he desperately needed money, he finally agreed to help. At around 8 p.m. on September 10, 1992, Reiko Yamaguchi put sedatives in her husband's curry rice. After eating, he fell asleep. Then, Keio helped take the husband to a seawall in the Tara area. During this process, he felt some regret and wanted to give up, but Reiko Yamaguchi threatened. If he didn't help, she would put all the blame on him. Reluctantly, Keio could only follow her instructions. Keio pushed Katsuhiko Yamaguchi into the sea. Afterward, Reiko stuck a fishing rod on the seawall, then pretended to run to a nearby house for help. Keio fled the scene. Unfortunately, the police didn't investigate thoroughly, so they successfully received the insurance money. After Katsuhiko's death, Keio moved in to live with Reiko Yamaguchi. Thanks to the insurance money, their life was quite comfortable. Reiko Yamaguchi then quit her job at the izakaya to become a housewife. However, within just 6 years, they had spent all the insurance money. Therefore, Reiko Yamaguchi came up with her old idea again. She wanted to kill Keio Sotoo to defraud the insurance company. One day, when the 3 children were not at home, she secretly put sedatives in the food. After Keio ate and fell into a deep sleep, she planned to light a cigarette and place it on flammable material in the house, wanting to disguise it as an accidental fire. However, Keio luckily escaped death because the cigarette went out halfway through burning. When he woke up, he realized something was wrong, but didn't dare report it to the police for fear of exposing the previous case. He could only endure it, pretending nothing had happened. When the plan failed, Reiko Yamaguchi turned her attention to her second son. She had bought insurance for all 3 children before, but was still hesitant about which one to choose. Finally, she chose the most obedient child, Toshitaka. This time, Reiko still asked Keio Sotoo for help. Threatened by her, he reluctantly agreed. At 10:30 p.m. that night, Reiko Yamaguchi lured her second son to Konagai Port in Nagasaki Prefecture to catch squid. Then, she gave him a sedative. At 12:30 a.m., while the boy was sound asleep, she used tape to bind his hands and feet. Then she asked Keio Sotoo to help throw him into the sea. Unexpectedly, as soon as he fell into the water, Yamaguchi Toshitaka suddenly woke up. The boy knew how to swim, so he quickly struggled free from the tape and swam towards the shore, shouting, "You bastards!" as he swam. Keio Sotoo then jumped into the water to subdue the boy. Reiko Yamaguchi knelt on the port, frantically pushing her son's head underwater until he stopped moving. Keio Sotoo continued to testify to the police that it was all Reiko Yamaguchi's plan, he was just helping. Afterward, Keio also felt very remorseful. Every night when he slept, he seemed to see Yamaguchi Toshitaka's face. He had thought about confessing, but ultimately lacked the courage. A year after the incident occurred, the police arrested Reiko Yamaguchi on charges of premeditated murder. At the same time, they conducted a thorough search of her house. As a result, they didn't find any sedatives, but they discovered a graduation memory book from Toshitaka's elementary school. It was full of words of gratitude for his mother, and he hoped that, when he entered middle school, his mother would still take care of him as before. The boy could never have imagined that the mother he cherished would later become a demon who killed her own child with her own hands. The police interrogated Reiko Yamaguchi. She admitted to killing her ex-husband, but said it was entirely his own fault. Katsuhiko Yamaguchi was an extremely selfish person who didn't care about her and the children, and even had an affair, ultimately leading to his mistress's husband coming to their home. Reiko initially didn't want to get involved in these troublesome matters, and only wanted to raise her 3 children well. But unexpectedly, Shota, the husband of the mistress, wouldn't let her go and forced her to have sexual relations. This was a great humiliation for her. What angered her more was that Katsuhiko Yamaguchi was indifferent to this, and only cared about enjoying himself with his mistress. By 1992, her husband had actively proposed divorce to marry his mistress. The other woman even instigated Katsuhiko Yamaguchi's mother to come to their house and persuade Reiko to voluntarily give up custody of their 3 children. This was something she could no longer bear. Reiko Yamaguchi said, she had long lost any feelings for Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, they were just living together to get by. Since he had been so heartless, she had nothing to be afraid of anymore. Before the divorce, she decided to end everything. Initially, Reiko had approached Shota for help, but he was too cowardly to do it. Then she met Keio Sotoo. They had known each other since 1991. Keio was someone who knew how to comfort her, and always tried to make her happy. When Reiko told him about her plan, Keio was very supportive and decided to act immediately. Afterward, he even proactively used his connections with the underworld to help her escape Shota's harassment. Reiko Yamaguchi was very moved by Sotoo's actions. Therefore, she entrusted him with managing all 100 million yen, about $907,000, of the insurance money. When he got this money, Keio Sotoo immediately paid off 30 million yen, about $272,000, of his previous gambling debts. He also gambled away the remaining money. By July 1993, he only had a few 10,000 yen left from the insurance money. The family's life once again faced financial problems. Reiko Yamaguchi had to take on part-time jobs outside to have money for household expenses. However, the money she earned was far from enough. Therefore, Keio Sotoo came up with the idea of insurance fraud again. This time, he targeted Toshitaka, Reiko's second son. Reiko Yamaguchi initially strongly opposed this, but Keio Sotoo was too greedy to listen to her advice. Under his constant persuasion, Reiko began to waver. One day she tried to give her son sedatives, then closed the room and opened the gas valve, intentionally creating an accident. But in the end, unable to bear the torment of her conscience, she told her eldest son about this. The eldest son, upon hearing this, quickly rushed home and opened the windows, luckily avoiding a tragedy. After this incident, Reiko Yamaguchi decided to eliminate Keio Sotoo, but was unsuccessful. When Keio learned about this, he had a big argument with Reiko, causing the relationship between them to become very tense. Reiko Yamaguchi suggested robbing an old lady. She was a woman who lived alone, with her children all working in big cities. Reiko had once done cleaning work at this old lady's house, which was in a luxurious villa in Saga Prefecture. At around 8 p.m. one day in September 1998, Keio Sotoo wore a mask and carried a knife to break into the old lady's house. After 7 hours of threats, he managed to rob 137,000 yen, about $1,240, in cash and 6 jewelry necklaces worth 1.2 million yen, about $1,240, $10,900. Because the old lady's house didn't have security cameras, the police couldn't trace Keio Sotoo. Although this robbery was quite successful, the money was quickly spent. Keio Sotoo again came up with the idea of insurance money. He continuously persuaded Reiko Yamaguchi to act against her second son and promised that after this time he would stop, no longer gamble, and live a good life. Reiko Yamaguchi was once again swayed by Keio's sweet words. And then the scene of her taking her son to the sea occurred as previously described. Reiko Yamaguchi said that she was originally a person without strong opinions. It was under the constant urging of others that she did such wrongful things. The police approached Shota and asked why he knew about Reiko Yamaguchi's plan, but didn't report it to the police. Shota said he was threatened by Keio Sotoo. Keio had connections with the underworld, so he was afraid. If he spoke out about it, he would be the next to suffer. Therefore, Shota didn't dare report to the police. Moreover, the person killed was Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, which was a good thing for him. He still had feelings for his ex-wife Kyoko, and this was an opportunity for him to reconcile with her. Afterward, the police met with Reiko Yamaguchi's eldest son and youngest daughter to gather more information. Both children reported that they had been given sedatives. The eldest son told the police. Mother had bought insurance for him worth 40 million yen, about $363,000, and for his younger sister worth 25 million yen, about $227,000. If the police didn't intervene and investigate this time, the next person thrown into the sea could be them. The two siblings continued to say that Keio Sotoo had a hot temper. Since he moved in to live with them, their family life had become tense, with almost daily violence and arguments. Their mother listened to Sotoo a lot, and her attitude towards the children was no longer the same as before. In fact, the two children had long known that their mother and Keio Sotoo had bad intentions, but they still didn't want to report to the police. After all, their mother had worked hard to raise them, and perhaps she had only done wrong things because of instigation. It was all Keio Sotoo's fault. When this news was published, people were shocked by the behavior of a mother killing her own child to defraud insurance money. They couldn't believe there could be such a mother in the world, and unanimously condemned Reiko Yamaguchi and Keio Sotoo. 2 years after the incident, the trial was held at the Nagasaki District Court. The defendants Reiko Yamaguchi and Keio Sotoo were charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, fraud, and robbery. Both pleaded guilty, but didn't admit to being the mastermind, instead blaming each other. At the court, defendant Reiko Yamaguchi cried, saying that the planner for both cases was Keio Sotoo. If she didn't follow his instructions, she would be subjected to violence. Faced with Reiko Yamaguchi's defense, the prosecutor argued that this was an extremely selfish act, and using children as sacrifices was unacceptable. The crime of severing family ties was unforgivable. The prosecutor demanded the death penalty for both defendants. The judge declared in court, for the murder of Katsuhiko Yamaguchi, the defendant Reiko Yamaguchi must bear primary responsibility. For the murder of Yamaguchi Toshitaka, both defendants are equally responsible. They committed the crime together, so there is no distinction in the severity of their punishment. In January 2003, after 32 court sessions, the court delivered its verdict. Defendants Reiko Yamaguchi and Keio Sotoo were found guilty of 2 counts of premeditated murder, fraud, robbery, and other charges. Both were sentenced to death. However, the defense lawyers disagreed with this verdict and appealed to the Fukuoka High Court. 6 years after the incident occurred, the appeal trial was held. The eldest son and youngest daughter of defendant Reiko Yamaguchi submitted a petition for leniency for their mother. Meanwhile, defendant Keio Sotoo said he sympathized with Reiko Yamaguchi's circumstances, which is why he cooperated in killing her ex-husband. Afterward, the idea of killing the second son was also Reiko's. He only participated in the execution. Keio hoped the court could consider leniency and uphold the death sentence for him. After consideration, the court made a final decision to overturn the death sentence for defendant Reiko Yamaguchi and replace it with life imprisonment. For defendant Keio Sotoo, the court maintained the original sentence. The story of Reiko Yamaguchi is a heartbreaking tragedy reflecting the dark sides of society and human nature. From a happy family, they fell into a spiral of crime, deception, and violence. This case is also a warning about the importance of love and respect within the family. When these values are eroded, tragedy can occur at any time. And that's the story for today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.